Hello folks, here are some what and what not to do if you've just been arrested for DUI. The first thing you want to do is you want to put an inventory together of everything that you've eaten within the 24-hour span of time before your DUI arrest. Sometimes what you eat can actually contribute to what's known as a false positive BAC of 0.08 or higher. Foods of this variety can include protein bars, certain hot sauces, sometimes soy sauce, sugar-free gum, certain sweet breads or foods like honey buns, other types of bread such as white or sourdough bread, or maybe even a meal you ate at a restaurant that contained or was sauced with white or red wine. Certain fermented sodas also and energy drinks can contribute to a false positive high BAC reading. The second thing that it would be wise of you to do is to research and collect any information concerning any automobile recalls of the make and model of your car, meaning the one that you drove when you were arrested for DUI. Oftentimes, the prosecutor will try to use your actual driving pattern as a symptom of your having driven under the influence. So for example, if you were speeding or driving too slow, failed to apply your brakes, so on and so forth, you'd actually be surprised how many defective cars are manufactured every year. Also, sometimes the vehicle itself may not have been recalled, but certain components of that same make and model might have been. For example, a faulty accelerator, brakes, power steering, etc. Have your car inspected for any mechanical, computer, or electronic failures or problems. It may be that this contributed, if not entirely, but at least in part to your allegedly erratic driving. By the way, this can actually be a very compelling defense, particularly if there was any sort of accident or accident-related injury involved. And speaking of accident-related injury, if you are accused of having refused the chemical test that you're required to take in the state of California under the implied consent law, it has to be a willful refusal. I'm not going to get too much into that here, possibly in a future video, because I want to keep the momentum with things that are a good idea to do if you've been arrested for DUI. The third thing that would be wise is to put an inventory together of all medications you regularly take. For example, if you have respiratory illnesses, any inhalers that you may be taking for asthma or COPD or other respiratory illness, vitamin supplements are another one, any mouthwash or scented products you generally use on your face, like aftershave lotion or cosmetics. Again, we're covering stuff that can, just like what I mentioned earlier with the foods, medication and cosmetics can contain, at minimum, trace elements of certain substances, including, and maybe not always including, alcohol, but can generate a false positive reading. Okay, by the way, when I say put an inventory together, don't just write stuff down. Of course, you want to write everything down, but you also want to try and collect as many receipts as possible, specifically if you ate or you dined out. You also have to be very careful. You can legitimately be arrested, tried, and convicted of DUI on account of prescription medication. So even though that could form a part of the defense, meaning any medications you were under, you have to be extremely cautious, because sometimes that can actually backfire and it can demonstrate that you were in fact under the influence. It doesn't have to be of a martini or a beer or a wine. It can actually be of an over-the-counter antihistamine, for example, which tends to cause drowsiness, or painkillers like Vicodin and that sort of thing. Okay, next thing, moving along here, immediately or as soon as you're able, within the 10 days of your DUI arrest, you want to make sure to call the Department of Motor Vehicles. Usually the DMV phone number you need to call will appear on the top corner of your temporary driver's license, which should appear on the top corner of your temporary license, which is that thin pink sheet of paper that you're given by the police officer when your actual driver's license is confiscated from you as part of the arrest. You want to make sure to request a DMV hearing. It's also known as an administrative per se hearing or an admin per se. Quite frankly, I personally am not a big fan of requesting by phone I mean, that's certainly your prerogative to do so. For example, at our office, we like to have these requests in writing. We fax them in. We verify and corroborate that they were received. We maintain proof of receipt, because if you don't do those things and you just rely on a phone call, and many people do and nothing happens, but if you want to create a margin of safety to help ensure that later on you're not accused of not having called in to request your DMV hearing, which can cause your license to be forfeited. So you have to be careful with that. If you do it by writing, it's, even if it gets lost in the shuffle, at least you have a paper trail as to that. Okay, and of course, the DMV hearing is an extremely eventful and important thing. I'm about to get into that now. The fifth thing to do, or also encompassed in all this, what not to do, what you want to do is you want to stay away from any lawyers that tell you that the DMV hearing is a lost cause, or they otherwise have a very dismissive attitude about it. There is the preconceived notion that the DMV generally will rubber stamp a suspension of your license even if you go through the hearing process. In my experience, that's nonsense. That's not generally or necessarily true. Just because they're difficult to beat doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile to put in a ton of time and effort into a DMV hearing, especially a lawyer who's well versed in and winning, and who has a good track record of having won those. Why is that the case? Well, winning at the DMV can actually have enormously positive consequences in your court case. Obviously, not only will you get to keep your driving privilege if you win at the DMV hearing, that's the short goal. Long-term goal is you can actually pick up a ton of momentum in court. A good lawyer, good DUI defense attorney knows how to leverage a victory before the DMV with a prosecutor, because something like that can actually shake the confidence of the prosecutor in your case, quite possibly resulting in a total dismissal without you having to enter a plea of nolo contendere, no contest, or guilty, but at minimum toward a leverage toward a positive plea bargain result with a meaningful reduction. So rather than a DUI or even a wet reckless, which these are priorable, meaning they can be used against you in the future if you pick up another case, so back to what I was saying, winning at the DMV can have tremendously positive repercussions when you can use that as plea bargaining power for a meaningful reduction, hopefully, of course, a dismissal in the case if that's possible. Finally, sixth item on this list, this is more what not to do now. You want to stay the hell away from really low-cost attorneys. Many lawyers charge too little to effectively marshal the resources in your defense that it's going to take to win. You will pay if you invest very, very, very little in legal counsel. The irony is that you're actually going to end up paying exponentially more in the long run, probably as much as 10 times over in the long run, between raised insurance premiums and lost job opportunities over the year that may involve, especially these days in California. It's virtually impossible to hold employment without reliable vehicle transportation. There's a difference between affordable, like Coimbra Law Firm, we're very affordable. We offer affordable payment plans. So there's that, but then there's also garage fire sale prices. For example, at our practice, we do have monthly installments in the low hundreds, but generally speaking, the resources are going to be there to put in a great fight for you to be able to avoid the jail time and all the other horrible possible consequences that can accompany a DUI conviction. Garage fire sale prices, as I like to call them, will leave your lawyer with too little resources to defend you, and also not going to be terribly motivated to put in the fight that's going to be necessary to beat a DUI case. I hope this has been very helpful to you. Best of luck.